Welcome to the Keto Podcast, the place where we tell the unfiltered truth about what happens after we've lost a huge amount of weight. We'll address the challenges that we all face in keeping that weight off, no matter how you did it, everything bariatric, everything weight loss drugs, and everything to help you keep your weight off for life. I'm your host, Mel Harris. I'm the founder of the Keto Method, and this is the podcast that I love doing the most. This is where I answer questions that have been submitted to me by my community. And this particular question is something that comes up a lot: alcohol. Alcohol, and specifically why your tolerance has changed and what that means for you. That sound? That's somebody enjoying a couple of glasses of wine with friends. And do you remember when you had 2 glasses of wine and that's what you used to drink at dinner parties before surgery? Maybe 3 if it was a celebration, but you were fine, right? You knew your limits. But now, half a glass and you're floored, dizzy, nauseous, or worse. You feel nothing at all until suddenly you're really drunk really fast. Well, welcome to your new relationship with alcohol post-bariatric surgery. And trust me, it's complicated. Let's talk about what actually happens to alcohol in your surgically altered body. Why does your tolerance disappear? And why are some bariatric patients at serious risk of developing alcohol use disorder after surgery? This is information that your surgical team might have kind of glossed over in your pre-op education, but it is critical that you understand it. Let me start with something you might not know. According to research, bariatric surgery patients have a significantly increased risk of developing alcohol use disorder after surgery. To you and me, that's dependency, it's addiction. Let me repeat that. After surgery. Not people who had drinking problems before. People who had normal social drinking patterns pre-op and then developed problematic drinking post-op. This same research found that the prevalence of alcohol use disorder increased from 7.6% before surgery to 9.6% 2 years after surgery. Now, that might not sound like a huge jump, but here's what's striking. The rate kept climbing, and the risk was particularly high for gastric bypass patients. So why am I starting with this? Because when we talk about alcohol after bariatric surgery, we're not just talking about whether you can have a glass of champagne at your friend's wedding. We're talking about a fundamental change in how your body processes alcohol, and that change comes with risks that you need to understand. I know some of you are thinking, I don't have a problem with alcohol. I barely drink. Why should I care about this? And that's a fair point. But here's the thing. The patients that develop issues post-op often didn't see it coming either. You've got to remember something. And this applies to everything in life. We don't know that we've got an addictive personality until it's too late. By the time we find out, we're already addicted to something. And that's really important to remember. You will not see it coming. Because the way alcohol affects your new anatomy creates the perfect storm. You feel the effects faster, stronger, and more unpredictably. And for some people, that becomes appealing, especially when you're dealing with the emotional complexity of massive weight loss. We're going to break down exactly what happens in your body and what the research shows and what you need to know to make informed decisions, because knowledge is protection and you deserve to be protected. In a normal digestive system, when you drink alcohol, it goes through your stomach first. And here's what most people don't know. Your stomach, our stomachs, actually has an enzyme called, let's see if I can remember how to pronounce this, alcohol dehydrogenase. I'm pretty sure it's that, or ADH for short. Now, that enzyme starts breaking down alcohol before it even reaches your bloodstream. This is called first-pass metabolism. It's your body's first line of defense against alcohol. About 10 to 30% of the alcohol you consume gets metabolized in your stomach before it hits your liver. But after gastric bypass surgery, where your stomach is dramatically reduced and much of it is bypassed, you lose most of this protective mechanism. Gastric bypass patients showed significantly higher peak blood alcohol levels compared to non-surgical controls when given the same amount of alcohol. Same amount of alcohol, higher blood alcohol levels, because that first pass metabolism has gone. Also after surgery, alcohol moves more quickly from your stomach pouch into your small intestine, and that's where absorption happens really fast. Before surgery, it would have taken about 60 to 90 minutes to reach your peak blood alcohol level. But after surgery, it can happen in as little as 30 minutes. And that means you will go from 0 to drunk much, much faster. And that rapid onset can catch you completely off guard. But we also have a reduced tolerance. And this one might seem obvious because you weigh less, so alcohol affects you more, right? But it's not just about body weight. Clinical and experimental research found that even when adjusted for a lower body weight, bariatric surgery patients showed a much higher sensitivity to alcohol. The researchers hypothesized that this was due to changes in how the body distributes alcohol and also changes in the liver enzyme, activity, etc. post-surgery. But practically speaking, your 2 glasses of wine from before surgery is now the equivalent to half a glass. And that limit can change over time as your weight changes. But there's also the problem of the calorie calculation. Alcohol has calories. 7 calories per gram to be exact. Well, after surgery, you're hyper-focused on getting enough protein, taking your vitamins, staying hydrated. Your stomach capacity is severely limited. A standard glass of wine is about 120 to 150 calories. A pint of beer, 180 to 200 calories. A gin and tonic, over 120. Well, that's not just empty calories in the abstract sense. That's actual space in your pouch that should be reserved for nutrients that your body desperately needs. The British Obesity and Metabolic Surgery Society, BOMSS, specifically mentions in their dietary guidelines that alcohol should be avoided, severely limited, because it displaces nutritious food and it provides no nutritional value while contributing to calorie intake. And then we have the risk of dumping syndrome. For gastric bypass patients specifically, there is this major issue. Many alcoholic drinks contain sugar. Cocktails, sweet wines, mixers. Well, remember when I spoke about dumping syndrome earlier? When sugar hits your small intestine too fast, your body floods your system with insulin and you feel absolutely terrible. Rapid heartbeat, sweating, nausea, diarrhea, weakness. Alcohol plus sugar? That's a double whammy. You can trigger dumping syndrome and get drunk simultaneously, which, as you might imagine, is a genuinely unpleasant and potentially dangerous experience. And then what about the hangover? Multiple bariatric patients report that hangovers post-surgery are significantly worse than before. And there's actually a physiological reason for this. You are likely to be chronically dehydrated anyway. It's hard to get in enough water when you're also trying to get in protein and you can't drink with your meals. But alcohol is a diuretic. It will dehydrate you further. And dehydration post-bariatric surgery can be really serious. We're talking electrolyte imbalances, kidney issues, and those spectacular headaches that make you question all your life choices. So let's summarize what happens when you drink alcohol post-surgery. It absorbs faster, hits you harder, it peaks quicker, it hangs around longer, it dehydrates you more, and it comes with the side of potential dumping syndrome. And remember, this isn't your pre-surgery body anymore. And treating alcohol like it is, that's where the problems start. Now, I already mentioned that there is a risk of addiction. And we kind of need to talk about that elephant in the room. Alcohol addiction after bariatric surgery, and I know this might feel uncomfortable, but it's common. You might be thinking, I'm not an alcoholic, I don't have a drinking problem, this doesn't apply to me. And you might be right, but you also might not be. And the research shows that the people who develop problems often don't see it coming at all. There's a theory in bariatric research called addiction transfer or cross addiction. And it's a very real thing. The idea is this: before surgery, if you were using food to cope with stress, anxiety, boredom, or emotional pain, physical pain, well, the surgery removes that coping mechanism immediately. You physically, once you come out of surgery, cannot eat the way you used to. But the underlying emotional issues, they don't get surgically removed. So some patients, not all of us, but some of us, transfer that addictive behavior to something else. Could be shopping, could be gambling, could be exercise, could even be relationships. But more often than not, it's alcohol. Research has shown that before surgery, about 7.6 met the criteria for alcohol addiction. 1 year after surgery, that dropped only a little bit, but down to 7.3%. But then it started climbing. 2 years post-op, 9.6%. By year 5, 10.7%. And the highest risk group, like I said, gastric bypass patients, particularly men who were younger at the time of surgery. Here's another piece of interesting research which has been published in Obesity Surgery Journal. It explored changes in brain chemistry after bariatric surgery. Weight loss alters dopamine signaling. That's the reward chemical. That's the thing that you feel gives you the credit for something you like. Before surgery, eating certain foods triggered that dopamine release. But after surgery, eating doesn't provide that same reward because your brain is essentially experiencing reward deficiency. Alcohol, however, does still trigger dopamine, maybe even more effectively than before because of how quickly it hits your system. Now, for some people, that becomes the new fix, the new way to feel good, the new way to cope, the new way to self-soothe. But that's where it gets dangerous. The main warning signs that you've got a problem with alcohol post-surgery would be regularly drinking alone, needing alcohol to relax or feel normal, increased frequency or quantity of drinking over time, hiding your drinking from family or friends, experiencing blackouts or memory gaps, continuing to drink despite negative consequences, or maybe you're feeling guilty about drinking but doing it anyway. And here's what I want you to understand. If you're experiencing any of those, it doesn't mean you're weak or you're flawed or you're broken. It means your brain chemistry has changed. Your coping mechanisms have been disrupted and you need support. Those patients who do the best after surgery, well, they're the ones who are honest about their struggles and they ask for help eagerly. In the UK, NHS bariatric programs are supposed to include mental health screening before surgery and psychological follow-up after. But look, the reality is follow-up is often limited and funding is tight. So support drops off after the first year, if you're lucky to get a whole year. And that's when the risk is highest. If you're struggling with alcohol use post-surgery, your GP can refer you to local alcohol services. Organisations like Alcoholics Anonymous, they have meetings across the UK, and many bariatric units have psychologists who specialise in post-surgical issues. You don't have to white-knuckle this alone. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because you deserve to know the full picture. You deserve to make intelligent decisions, and you deserve to recognise the risk factors before they become problems. So, what do the actual clinical guidelines say about alcohol after bariatric surgery? Some of them say that alcohol should be avoided for at least the first year after surgery, and then consumed very sparingly thereafter, if at all. And their reasoning for that is because altered metabolism increases intoxication. The calorie content interferes with weight loss, there's a big risk of dehydration, and there is this massive potential for the transfer of addiction. In America, they're even more conservative because they will say to you, no alcohol for at least 6 months post-surgery, lifetime caution with alcohol consumption, complete avoidance for anyone with a history of alcohol use disorder, and awareness that sensitivity is permanently altered. NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care, they don't have a specific bariatric alcohol guideline, but their obesity pathway emphasises the importance of addressing addictive behaviours if it's part of a long-term weight management. But here's the disconnect. Many surgical teams mention alcohol very briefly in your pre-op education, but it often gets lost in the flood of all the other information they give you. And this means that more than half of patients will go into surgery not fully understanding this risk. And you know what? Here is literally evidence-based guidelines. In year 1, avoid alcohol completely because your body is still healing, your tolerance is most unpredictable, and your nutritional needs really need to be your first priority. In year 2, if you choose to drink, just have a maximum of 1 standard drink on rare occasions. Never drink alcohol on an empty stomach, although eating before drinking is challenging without limiting pouch space. Never, ever drink alone. Never, ever drink to cope with emotions. Track your frequency. If it's becoming regular, it's becoming a problem. And for the rest of your life, you really need to completely avoid alcohol if you have a family history or a personal history of alcohol addiction. If you're using alcohol to cope with stress or emotions, or if you experience any warning signs of problematic use. And here's the hard truth. For many bariatric patients, the safest long-term approach is complete abstinence. I know that's not what you want to hear. You've already given up so much. The idea of never having a glass of wine at a celebration, it feels like one more loss. But the question to ask yourself is, what's the actual value of drinking versus the actual risk? And for most people, when you honestly weigh that equation, the answer becomes clear. So I've given you all the science and all the warnings, so let's now get realistic. Some of you will choose to drink occasionally, despite the risks. And I'm not here to judge that. I'm just here to give you harm reduction strategies, ways that you can minimize your risk if you make that choice. So first things first, you need to know your metrics. Before surgery, you might have had a 2-drink limit. After surgery, that limit is probably half a drink to 1. Not a large one, half a drink to a small to medium, maximum. The other problem is you can't know what your new tolerance level is until you test it. And testing it in the wrong environment, like at a pub with friends or when you're stressed, is actually quite dangerous. If you're going to test your tolerance, do it at home with somebody who knows you've had surgery. Do it when you're very well hydrated and well fed. And do it on a day when you've got no obligations. Accept that your tolerance might keep changing as your weight changes. You also need to choose your drinks wisely. Not all alcohol is created equal post-surgery. Lower risk options, relatively speaking, if you're going to go for it, is a dry white wine because it's got lower sugar than a sweet wine. A light beer, though the volume is a challenge with a limited pouch space, and don't forget it's gassy, so you'd need to let it go flat. Spirits with 0-calorie mixers, like vodka with a light tonic or something. Again, be aware that they are fizzy. But the higher risk options are cocktails with sugar, like margaritas, mojitos, anything with a simple syrup. Sweet wines, dessert wines, some red wines, port, sherries, and also cream-based drinks, even though they're delicious. Stay away from the White Russians, the Baileys. They are very high in calorie and very high in fat. And again, stay away from anything that's carbonated, champagne, beer. You're only going to end up with the double risk of carbonation and alcohol. With the hydration protocol, if you drink, you must be militant about hydration. It's really important. So drink 500 mils of water before consuming alcohol. 1 glass of water for every alcoholic drink. And then another 500 ml before bedtime, of water that is. In the morning, the next day, drink an electrolyte water. Yeah, I know, it's tedious. Yeah, it means you'll spend the night going to the bathroom. But it's the difference between a manageable experience and a dangerous one. Never drink to cope. I've said it before, I'm saying it again. This is the line in the sand. Social drinking at celebrations, potentially manageable. But drinking because you're stressed, sad, anxious, lonely, or bored, that is you on the downward slope to addiction. If you find yourself reaching for alcohol for emotional reasons, that's your signal to reach for support instead. Therapy, your bariatric team, a support group, a trusted friend, us here at Keogh. If you set and follow clear rules, you will do better than people who try to moderate situationally. And I have found that the examples of rules that work are: I only drink at weddings and milestone birthdays. I never drink alone. I never drink 2 days in a row. I never drink to feel better. If I drink once a week for 2 weeks in a row, I have a month off. Your rules might be different, but having them and following them is protective. And here's what I really want you to hear. If following these harm reduction strategies feels exhausting or restrictive, well, that's data. That's your body and your brain telling you that maybe the easiest path is just not drinking at all. And that's not deprivation, that's self-preservation. And when I've asked my Keogh method, what's your relationship with alcohol post-surgery? Well, the responses were really revealing. One member said, I haven't touched alcohol since surgery 3 years ago. At first I missed it, now I don't even think about it, and I'm honestly relieved not to have to navigate it. Another one shared, I tried a glass of wine at 6 months post-op. Half a glass in, I was dizzy and nauseous. My body gave me a very clear message, this isn't for you anymore, and I'm okay with that. Great. But then there was this. I started drinking more after surgery, not less. It was the only thing that made me feel good anymore. It took me a year to realize that it had become a problem. I'm sober now, but I wish someone had warned me this could happen. And the last one is why we're having this conversation. Because the majority of patients are fine. They either don't drink or they drink rarely and carefully. But a subset of patients slide into problematic use and they don't see it coming and they feel shame about it, so they don't ask for help. I want you to know, if that's you, you are not alone. You're not weak. You're experiencing a documented physiological and psychological response to surgery. And there is help available. In the UK, you can talk to your GP. You can contact Alcoholics Anonymous. There are many, many places that you can call. I'll put some links in the show notes. Don't forget, you can always contact Keo. You did not go through surgery to trade one problem for another. You deserve support, and asking for it isn't failure, it's strength. So, let's just recap on the alcohol issue. The things that change after bariatric surgery, particularly gastric bypass, are you lose first pass metabolism, alcohol absorbs faster, hits harder, peaks quicker, and hangs around longer. The risks? Easy. You get increased rates of alcohol use disorder, particularly in the 2 to 5 year window. Gastric bypass patients and younger patients are at the highest risk. The guidelines? Mainly just avoid it for the first year minimum and extreme caution thereafter. If you do drink, know what your tolerance levels are. Choose drinks wisely, avoid sugar and carbonation, stay hydrated militantly, and never drink to cope emotionally. Set hard rules. The bottom line, for many bariatric patients, complete abstinence is the safest long-term strategy. I know this episode might have been confronting. Maybe you're sitting there thinking about your own drinking patterns and feeling a bit uncomfortable. Well, good. Discomfort means you're paying attention. Here's what I want you to understand. You've done something extraordinary. You've transformed your body. You've committed to a new life. And part of protecting that new life is understanding how it works now. Not how it used to work, how it works now. Your body isn't the same. Your brain chemistry isn't the same. Your risk profile, it's not the same. And the decisions that were safe before surgery might not be safe now. This is not a judgment. It's just a new reality for us. The more you understand your new reality, the better equipped you are to navigate it successfully. So if you found today's episode valuable, please share it with someone in your bariatric community. This is information that can genuinely save lives. And if you're struggling with anything we discussed today, please reach out for help. Visit keomethod.com for resources or contact your healthcare team. You're not alone in this journey, and you don't have to figure it out alone either.